Today, we're going to continue in this video talking about abnormal behavior, and we're going to start with mood or affective disorders. So, mood or affective disorders are extreme or inappropriate emotions. So, we'll talk about depressive disorder and bipolar disorder. Those are both fall under this category of a mood disorder. And major depressive disorder, often referred to the uh, by MDD, if you can see right here, is prolonged hopelessness and lethargy. So, often, a person will just be described as depressed or maybe depressive disorder, but those fall under this category of major depressive disorder. And then bipolar disorder was formerly called manic depressive disorder. And bipolar disorder is the fluctuation between depression, which, major depressive disorder, and mania, which is an overexcited or hyperactive state. So, starting off with major depressive disorder, these symptoms of major depressive disorder are be feelings of sadness for more than 2 weeks without a clear reason. So, of course, we're not talking about a person who is experiencing grief. But this is, a long-lasting sadness without a clear reason. A change in sleep and appetite is another symptom. Feelings of worthlessness or low self-esteem, a lack of interest in activities that the person once enjoyed, and difficulty concentrating. Under this kind of umbrella of major depressive disorder, it's also seasonal affective disorder, which is a depression only at certain times of the year. So mostly, a lot of times in winter when there's not as much sunlight and, it's cold and people are inside a lot more. People can experience a seasonal affective disorder. So again, going back to the DSM-5, what constitutes a diagnosis of major depressive disorder? Here are kind of the checklist of things. The person has to have at least 5 of those symptoms, like I said, over that 2-week period. And it has to cause impairment to daily life. So if it impacts everyday life, and they have at least 5 of these over that 2-week period. So depressed mood for most of the day, markedly diminished interest or pleasure in activities most of the day, significant weight loss or gain, insomnia or sleeping too much, physical agitation or lethargy, fatigue or loss of energy, feelings of worthlessness, excessive or inappropriate guilt, problems thinking, concentrating, or making decisions, and recurrent thoughts of death and suicide. Another disorder under the umbrella of mood disorders is bipolar disorder. And this is a disruptive mood dysregulation disorder. And again, it has those kind of twofold. So bi, of course, meaning two, polar disorder. So the two kind of factors in it are the manic episodes and the depressed episodes. And we just described depression before. So all of those things would fall under the depressed episode. For the manic episodes, these are things that are very, very different from depressed episodes. The person would be very high energy, feel very confident and powerful, even invincible, a false um, sense of well-being. I just wrote sense of well-being, but a false sense of well-being, over talkative, overactive, elated, having little need for sleep. So this can at times be dangerous even more than the depression, and sort of why it can be a little bit hard to recognize, because the person wouldn't always feel that, lethargy and the deep sadness of the depression, but would also feel, experience the direct opposite of that mania. So, what are the different causes of mood disorders? There are different schools of thought on this. From the biological perspective, we know that mood disorders run in families. There are genetic influences on mood disorders. And there's also effects in the brain. So diminished brain activity during depressive states and more brain activity during periods of mania. There's low frontal lobe activity, which is the reward centers in that frontal lobe during depressed states. And in fact, even a smaller frontal lobe in people with severe depression can be seen in MRI scans, smaller by 7%, which is, a significant amount in people with severe depression. So the brains can be physically different. There's also biochemical influences. It's a big one. In depression, there is low serotonin, um, or norepinephrine. In bipolar disorder, more acetylcholine receptors can be seen. In fact, this is the brain of one person, and you can see the ups and downs of bipolar disorder in these scans. So these are just a few days apart. You can see the first and second one are just 1 day apart. First one is a depressed state. The second is a manic state, and then the third is a depressed state. And just days apart, like I said, and you can see the changes in these scans. So we know that is a true cause. There's also theories behind the social cognitive perspective. Negative thoughts and moods interact. So people who have recurring negative thoughts also experience recurring negative moods. They're the self-defeating beliefs, learned helplessness, and rumination, which is the focusing on a problem, can lead to poor moods. And there's the explanatory style. So if someone has a stable, global, or internal explanation, so who do you blame for your problems? Is it are they on you? Are they on someone else? Also, who do you credit for your success? Is it on you? Is it on someone else? So that can lead to, or it can also affect these mood disorders. And then depression is a vicious cycle. We'll look at that in a minute. Here's the explanatory style and depression. So the example they give here is breaking up with a boyfriend or girlfriend. If it's stable, I'll never get over this. If it's seen as temporary, this is hard to take, but I will get through this. So same situation, how do they see it? If it is seen as global, without my boyfriend or girlfriend, I can't seem to do anything right, or is it specific? I miss my boyfriend or girlfriend, but thankfully I have family and other friends. Is it internal or external? Internal, the breakup was all my fault. External, it takes two to make a relationship work and it wasn't meant to be. So if if the person is answering in that left column, that can lead to depression. Right column leads to successful coping. And that idea of depression is a cycle. The first, if a stressful experience is introduced and a person has a negative explanatory style, they can experience that depressed mood and then have cognitive and behavioral changes, which leads to, again, the stressful experience and so on and so forth. So that's the idea of the cycle. Okay, moving on to our next topic, we are going to talk about schizophrenia. And schizophrenia is sort of a misunderstood disorder. It is not multiple personalities. It is really a split from reality. So it's not that there are, multiple people talking, or multiple, people inside. It's really a split from reality that is experienced. It's a chief example of psychosis, which is a psychotic disorder, and it's categorized by disordered or distorted thinking, which includes delusions and hallucinations. Delusion is a belief that has no basis in reality. Some common delusions or two kind of categories of the delusions are delusions of persecution, which is, paranoia, the idea that people are out to get a person. Um, and then there are, on the opposite side, delusions of grandeur, which is the idea that the person has power and influence, that they are, a special person. They're, even in some instances like a king of something, or they have the idea that they are more important or powerful or influential than they are. And then hallucinations is the perception in the absence of a sensory simulation. So hearing, seeing, things that are not actually there. And another thing is a breakdown in selective attention. Schizophrenia is also can be um, expressed in a diminished and inappropriate emotions. Inappropriate emotions, including a flat affect or an emotionless state, and inappropriate actions, which is more commonly thought of, when the word or the name schizophrenia is brought up, it's mostly, thought of these inappropriate actions. A person can be catatonic or remained motionless for long periods of time, can experience disruptive social behavior or senseless and compulsive acts like rocking back and forth or rubbing of the arm. Um, and so those are kind of the things that a person usually thinks of when they hear of schizophrenia. The onset and development of schizophrenia. The typical onset of symptoms happens in young adulthood, around the early 20s. Around 1 in 100 people live with schizophrenia, and men tend to experience symptoms earlier, earlier, more severely, and more often than women. Sometimes symptoms can appear suddenly. Sometimes they are gradual. There's not really a one more than the other. It really just depends on the situation. Sometimes it can be brought on by stress. Sometimes it just happens gradually. Individuals who have schizophrenia experience positive and negative symptoms. Positive and negative, again, not meaning good or bad, but add or take away. Positive, excess in behavior, thought, and mood. Those hallucinations. That's a big, thing that it's something that's not there that they experience. And then the negative symptoms, excessive behavior, thought, or mood. One thing with schizophrenia, understanding schizophrenia, so why kind of does it happen? Again, there are different um, schools of thought with why it happens, but a big one that we can physically see is a brain abnormalities. So we can see dopamine overactivity in individuals with schizophrenia, specifically the D4 dopamine receptor. It is 6 times that of a typical person. So that is a big difference. It is known that dopamine blocking drugs can lessen the symptoms of schizophrenia, and also that drugs that increase dopamine, like amphetamines and cocaine, can intensify symptoms of schizophrenia. We also see abnormal brain activity and anatomy. So the frontal lobe and the core brain activity, we see low activity in the frontal lobe and high activity in the core with the thalamus and the amygdala. And we also know that there are fluid-filled areas of the brain in many people who suffer with schizophrenia. And interestingly, there's also a link between maternal virus during pregnancy. So women who experience illness during pregnancy, a virus, are at a higher risk of having a child who has schizophrenia later in life. Um, Things even like influenza, having the flu during pregnancy, can show a greater risk of schizophrenia. There's also genetic predisposition. We can see this with these twin studies. And here are some of the warning signs um, of schizophrenia if a mother is severely schizophrenic: birth complications, separation from parents,